we go through this like whole ritual. I'd drink, stuff for my throat, drink that throat coat tea and do vocal exercises to warm up. And I'd get in there and I'd be like,
This is Champagne is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Champagne is Also a Band podcast is proud to be a part of the Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Welcome to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. Today, I have Austin Parker from Midnight Leg, and we're going to be talking about Midnight Leg's newest album, first album, the Losing the Luster album. And so, Austin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sven. It's lovely to be here.
Let's get into it.
All right.
So, I'm curious. This is the first album released by Midnight Leg.
Correct.
And how long has Midnight Leg been in existence?
We played our first show at the Brass Rail Fest last December 4th, actually. Christopher Francis, he goes by both. Him and I got together about, June, July last year, started sitting around and just messing with songs. So it's been a year that we've been writing.
It's predominantly you and Chris writing the music, and we can get into this later, but typically when there's a songwriter in the band, usually the band kind of fills it in with their own flavor, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it works.
Granted, we should just jump right into the album, but I'm curious about what Midnight Leg's sound or definition of their sound would be. I tried to pin down exactly what kind of punk style I want to call it, and maybe it's beyond just punk, but I almost think that this album is kind of this lesson in the history of punk, because there's so many different, there's The Clash, there's Sex Pistols, it's so many parts that I just thought, that feels, and maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but kind of like a tip of the hat to some of these earlier bands. How would you characterize your style?
I mean, thank you for noticing. We definitely give a big homage to the first wave of punk rock. All the stuff that came in the 70s, like early as, the MC5 and the Stooges, into the Ramones, and then your Sex Pistols and Clash, with the British invasion part of it. We're fans of it all. And even going from there, taking the late 70s glam rock, David Bowie, Sweet, Big Star, Slade, to name a few. Kind of want to run that way with it a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want to be any sort of direct copy. We just want to take all of these things we're super huge fans of and then put our own spin on it. A modern take and taste-wise, what all that stuff before us was.
In the songwriting process, do you start off usually with like a riff, or like the lyrics, or how does that songwriting process work?
I write lyrics constantly. I keep like a lyric journal almost, depending on what's going on with my life. An abstract thought or an actual, situation that has been something I've been dealing with or going through just on a whim that day. I'll write like a whole structured song, which doesn't mean that's how it's always going to be. This will be like what I have, and I'll bring that to Chris, or he'll bring me a riff, and we're like, all right, let's see if we can marry something together, because he's got riffs like stored in his phone for days, and I got the lyrics. So when we do this, it usually happens pretty organically, aside from like first sitting down. We never were like, all right, let's do this. Let's write. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're getting a repertoire. Everything kind of just came as it did after the initial being like, hey, we need some songs to play. We just match it up, and we're both very flexible on how we can, manipulate what we have to work with each other.
I guess, why don't we just launch into the first song on this EP, Out of My Way? And I'm sorry, Out of My Way, because I was like, out of my way. Like, just,
it wasn't meant to be that proper.
I know, but it's just like, it's interesting to me in terms of the crafting of when you pick the songs that you want to actually record and put into an album, is maybe the particular order and exactly what the overall theme, or is it just going to be a collection of songs? So I'm curious, Out of My Way there's no, how do I say this? There's no ramping up. It's right there. There's not, and I'm curious about the choice of that song as the opener, so to speak.
Well, we wanted to kick you in the teeth right away. This whole album, but that song in particular, when it was initially written, it meant something completely different. Where I was at in my life when I wrote the lyrics to that, I was in a very grandiose place. I thought of just reliving my younger days of just hey, I'm going out, I'm getting dressed up. I'm going to go out on the town. So, get out of my way. I'm here and nobody can stop me. But it actually kind of transformed, because the more I've gone through life changes, I realized I've been in my own way a lot. And actually, Chris really helped me realize that that's kind of how the meaning kind of shifted. A lot like the name, our band name also. We can get back to that. I realized that a lot of my problems were caused because I just needed to get out of my way. You can hear kind of faintly on the end of the track where there's a backup Chris is doing. It's just like, excuse me, can you get out of my way, please? And basically, I think it's like talking to yourself.
I'm just curious, are there any particular lyrics? I mean, you mentioned some particular words that were in the song that changed, but I'm curious what part of the song, the meaning changed for you as now that you're out performing it, and was it in the process of writing it that the words changed? I'm wondering where that line is.
I had the idea so set in my head because I ended up having to write one more verse to it. When I wrote that other verse, we had the song nailed. I needed lyrics for one more. And the way I wrote about it, I didn't even think. I just wrote what I was feeling. Because the first two verses, they're like, look at me, watch out, if you don't get out of my way, it's going to be bad for you, and then at the end, it pretty much is saying, instead of getting rowdy and crazy, it's like, I'm going to take care of it on stage. Just strap your 6-string on and give it a strum, just playing out to feed the ears of the young. About to start playing, so let's lower the lights. Amps, pedals, mics is how we end all our fights. Because anymore, I don't have to go out and fight like I used to. I used to be a big fighter when I was partying. Did all sorts of, stuff that just wasn't necessary. Now it's like, I can still party and have a good time, but I don't need to get loaded. And I do it by playing on stage.
One of the things that I actually love, the pre-chorus, the way that it ramps it up with the background ahs and even the ascension of, I guess, the background. How did you pick that lead up into the chorus? And it's just, there's this great kind of, it builds the energy just before you hit that chorus.
Honestly, it is too bad that Francis wasn't feeling well today, because all that was him. I tried to go about it with a different idea. I was thinking more of this gang vocal that was going to be very reminiscent of old boy type, like Cockney Rejects type stuff. Chris did a lot of layering with that. I love it. It sounds great to me.
I mean, it's a great intro to the album. And next, following that is the TTT, or the Tattooed Temptress, if I understood correctly. What
Tantalizing Tattooed Temptress.
Tantalizing. Okay, I'm so bad with lyrics. So
that's okay.
Anyway, the Tantalizing Tattooed Temptress. It's kind of a shift. There's like the blues roots of punk.
Yeah,
that appears in there. So you've got kind of the walking bass line.
Yeah, that 12-bar blues riff.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, how did that come about? But again, great use of like the background, the la 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 or na na na. It's, you know, it's so very, I don't know. It's reminiscent, and I can't necessarily put my finger on like that particular style and say like this is the band that it reminds me of, but I know I've heard that kind of sound.
Yeah, it's not a uncommon thing, and that's like another homage that we're paying there. We all love Johnny Thunders and the New York Dolls, so a lot of that stuff on this song comes from that. I had been listening to a song by a band called the River City Rebels. They have this song that's kind of similar subject matter as this song. It's like about a girl. I couldn't get this riff out of my head, and I was like, do you know these kinds of riffs, Chris? And I know I keep going back and forth between Chris and Francis. Sure. I call him Chris, but he likes to go by Francis. But I've known him for like 20 years, and that's how I was introduced to him. And then he just started playing something, and it just, you know, it was different, but of that same vein. And then I was just like, I've got a song for this. I wrote the song back when I was like my early 20s.
I don't know. It's a nice shift from the Out of My Way and then into the, I mean, there's even an organ in there.
Yes.
And it's just got that.
Tyler plays the keys on that.
There's a riff, there's the lyrics, and then do you create the melody for the vocals then?
I just let it flow. Like, I just match wherever the tune sits at the time, and I usually try to match to it. And if not, we work it out. Chris is kind of the maestro. He's the conductor. But at the same time, like, once it's written, we all really, I mean, our rhythm section holds it down. Like, Tyler and Nico are so solid. They work together in bands before, so they know each other well. And Tyler's he's just a maniac. It's like 26 or 27. He's the young one. So like he just has that ADD energy.
Talking about the rhythm section, I want to jump into Delusions of Grandeur, which I know that this is jumping to the end of the song, but it's kind of interlaced throughout is some of the tom work on that and that drum. It's just something about it that it works kind of, in some ways it works in contrast to what's going on, but then it also like supplements what's going on, which I just love. I guess that's not really a question. That's just kind of a statement that I noticed. One of the things that I like actually as part of the recording process is the vocals are doubled. Is that you and Francis? Or
on that one, it's just doubles of me. All the ambiance in the background, the like oohs and ahs in the background, that's backups done by Chris. But the lead vocal that's me doubling up.
Because I feel like that adds some really nice sound. And I'm guessing if you do this live, you have someone doubling you, or no?
No.
Just, okay.
I don't know what it was. That song was tricky to record because we had to really beef it up, you know, with those dual vocals, all the background stuff. Live, we play it a little faster, a little longer with that tom work at the end. Like, Chris will fade out, and then it'll go a measure, and then Nico will fade out. But then they'll, like, each come in and on the fourth beat or whatever it is, and it's nicely put together.
Nice. And is there I feel like this is a question for Francis, but there's a couple of spots in there where the guitar is doubled, and I don't know if it's actually like a guitar effect that's doing it, that's kind of creating a harmony at the same time.
I highly doubt it.
Okay.
There's a lot of guitar parts. Just little things he put in there, little accompaniments that were just precisely thought out and placed. Like, I'm a very novice guitar player. Like, I can hush around, but
Same.
So I know enough of what's going on to know how to keep time with whatever.
Right.
So
Right. Jumping into the next song, Just a Friend, I feel like this is the song, and if you look at it in terms of number of songs and kind of a trajectory, this is like the middle of the album, right? So it's kind of this chiller. I mean, I want to say that there's the guitars are a little bit cleaner, but there's still a nice grit to them. But that guitar part coming in is it's just nice. It's the harmonies that are happening in those chords are just great. Yeah,
it's like a 6-string blanket, just warms you up.
I really just thought of that as like a chilling down, and like, was that intentional to throw that chilling down tune like midway through, or?
Well, for sure, yeah. That's not what we want to show you at first, and that's not what we want to leave you with. But we do love this song.
Yeah,
it means a lot. It's got a really good groove to it. I love watching Nico when we play this because he just starts rocking back and forth and like has this cool little like hip swivel he does with his bass, just swinging. We thought middle would be perfect for it. Give you kind of like, not that you need a break, but it's just the perfect spot to put it because it just gives you time to sit back and kind of groove. And it's actually like a crowd favorite. A lot of the people at the shows are like, that's the one they scream out.
And do you usually put that like middle of the set, or? Okay.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We do a tuning break right before that, and then just ease back into it. Second half of the set, we go through the set, kind of like the Ramones, just back to back to back. I don't do a whole lot of talking in between. We just let the music speak for itself.
You said, when you actually perform, you just go back to back to back. In this album, there's some, I want to say there's like some fillers that you throw in kind of to set the mood or even make it seem as if there's more people or I don't know. It's just interesting. Some guitar noises and, just like kind of the amp just humming along or like glass breaking and things like that.
Yeah,
so I was curious about like some of the decisions to do that.
Once again, a lot of them came naturally, pretty organic. There's one, I forget what it's on, but there's one where Chris has like just a really slow, like where he's just pulling his fingers off the strings, but it's like he's doing it really slow, and it takes up a couple of seconds, and it's just like that's supposed to be like that, even if it was or wasn't. I never even asked him about it.
Like it's the end of the song, and you're finally just letting go of the
you're just kind of like taking your breath, like just letting your final breath out.
Jumping into Give It a Rest. This one, I just thought the Clash, kind of that feel, a little bit of the poppy kind of sound that you associate with the Clash. A little bit of, I mean, they have, the Clash tends to be, has more of that melodic quality in the vocals that you think of in terms of with like more of the pop line. This is the one that has that ascension kind of playing in through there. Let's talk a little bit about how this song came together.
This was actually the first song Chris and I put together. This one was, honestly, I just randomly went through my book, opened a page and put my finger down and was like, all right, let's try this one. I think he asked me like he usually does. He's like, how does it sound? Like, how does it go? And then I'll just kind of sing talk. Honestly, it came together really fast. Like when we did this, when we had a verse and a chorus to this, it was like, I was like, okay. Because even though I've known Francis for 20 years, I'd never played music with him before. I had been looking to start, a music project because it had been over 10 years since I've done anything. Someone I know that I used to work with grew up with him, and I was like, hey, that guitar player dude, Chris, right? Yeah, I was like, is this gonna work? You never know, especially with me not being able to like come up with the riffs myself, being able to speak in like chords and all that. Like I'm just sitting there going it worked. So that was when I knew. I was like, all right, I'm gonna work with this dude.
Since you brought it up, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, if you're not comfortable or whatever, about the 10-year gap, like what made you want to come back to music and like decide that you wanted to do that again?
I had quite the journey. I'm still on it. I started going to shows and hanging out and partying and stuff when, pretty young. I was 13 when I went to my first show. And, as soon as I started going, I started drinking and stuff. And that continued. And over the years, it became more about the drinking than it did about anything else. And it affected all parts of my life. Severe alcoholic drug addict for better part of 25 years. When I had been in my last band, it was just like the way it ended badly, and I just kind of washed my hands with it. Was like, okay, I'm just gonna party. And I did. I go to shows, of course, but it got so bad that I had liver failure. I almost died. I ended up having to give it all up. It was a real hard thing to do. Didn't think it could be done. I was so reliant on it. It's how I grew up. Like, everyone in my family's an alcoholic, and I got some help, and I was able to knock it off. And I'm still, working on living life like that every day. But it got enough time had passed and be like, man, I don't know of anything going on here, and there needs to be good music in this town. What can I do to help? And what can I do to let my creative juices flow again? Because I started to have feelings again. Like, I was just a numb shell for so long. When I was able to start feeling again, I was like, I need to put this out in the world.
Just to kind of clarify, you had some of the lyrics, were some of those lyrics written before this journey began, or like
there's stuff I've taken, that ideas I've had in my head for 20 years or more, little things here and there that, I had in old bands that I never did anything with, or took parts of that, rearranged it and recycled it and made it a new thing. And my part of it is all like a recycled collective of, my past.
And I find it interesting is, going back to the first song, talking about Out of My Way, that you've reevaluated kind of what this song actually means. And I think in some ways you just getting back into music is also redefining what music means to you, right? So it doesn't,
Most definitely.
It's interesting to see that this is also kind of giving that same kind of sense of reevaluation. I mean, the title of the album is Losing the Luster, and I'm sure that there's that idea of, I'm not sure, but my interpretation is, there's this idea that this approach or way to look at life has a certain kind of luster to it, but in reevaluating it, you realize that it doesn't have that luster that it once had. So, I'm assuming a lot in terms of what's happening, but
it's you're in the same ballpark. The luster for me was that allure of bright lights and stardom with, parties and, women and drugs and alcohol and, like the rock star dream, whatever, that means to you, when all you're doing is just existing, living for your next, fix. It loses its luster after you do that for long enough. It's actually taken from one of the songs.
I remember hearing it, and I should have written it down. But which song is it?
It's an Attic.
Okay, because I was guessing that, but I wasn't sure. Going into the second to last song, Attic, that has this very like Sex Pistols. I mean, to me, it just hits me as Sex Pistols. And as much as the intro going into an album is important, I feel like also how you leave the listener is just as important. Like, what's going to make them want to listen and take that journey again from beginning to end. And I feel like Addict and then Time to Go has that like send off, but also like, hey, come on back, at some point. So I'm just curious, like the choice of Addict, that like second to last, what was that choice about?
I don't know if I ever even thought about it. I think a lot of how this order is kind of goes by how our set list goes. Like a lot of the songs, like they'll end with the same key as the next song begins. You talk about the journey of the albums. Out of my way, you're going out. This is, this big deal. Look at me. Get out of my way. I'm a big deal. Kind of like a romantic rendezvous. Delusions. There's, finding out that person is not who you thought. They're a little bit crazy.
With the crazy eyes.
Yes. That was a big thing for trying to find love. I think for a long time, it was either just a night with some tattoo girl, finding out someone's crazy, or getting it wrong and just being like, well, I guess you're just my friend. So then after that, you just got to give it a rest. That basically means like letting go. What are you letting go from? The fact that, you're an addict. Yeah, I didn't even mean for any of these really to sync up when I was writing lyrics. We all choose these songs together. Like, this is not any one person's thing. So I don't speak for any of my bandmates. I'm speaking on behalf of them right now, like, because they're not here, but I'm not speaking for them as far as, I'm just letting you know what everything means to me.
That's why I want to chat with you about this album and find your take on it. So, Time to Go. I feel like this is one of the songs that I feel like encapsulates that idea of like early punk, where it's just like minute and a half most. Get in, get out, just hit it hard, and it's a perfect closer for a punk album. I feel like the only thing I would say is yes, it is the get in, get out kind of thing, but it's also, I wish I knew where to take that energy that gets created in that last song. You know what I mean? And that's just maybe more of me in my own, how I like to listen to music. But I still feel that it fits, that kind of emulates that pent up energy too, right?
Oh, like definitely. That's like early 80s kind of got it, more of that kind of vibe to it, like whether it be New York or California, bands that were just in and out, whether it's Black Flag or Fear or Circle Jerks. That's what I've always got from this song. Now, this one, Chris wrote entirely. Like, he wrote the lyrics, he wrote the riff. Of course, the other guys write their parts. Yeah, that's why Chris and I both sing it. Because since I don't play an instrument, I just don't want to be standing on stage not doing anything. So that one's his baby, but I feel all of it too. It's a lot like Give It a Rest. It's just time to go, letting go, just knowing when is enough. You got to know when to call it for the day. Like, we all got to sleep at some point.
We've talked about this song. Now let's talk about getting this recorded. If I understand correctly, this was all home recorded with Francis.
Yes,
doing the recording.
He has his own studio. He calls it Crux Recording. Yeah, it was all his equipment. We spent the duration of a good few months. I think we started in January and released it in August, but it's funny because the rhythm was done in like less than 2 weeks. It would have been quicker, but they just went and they did it on the days. It probably took longer to set up the mics for the drums than it did to record the whole thing. Nico came in and knocked his parts out. Chris had some scratch tracks that he had just so I could hear it, but I had been in the studio for so long, and whenever I did it before, I was always so drunk. It was never as good as it could have been. But the one thing was, it gave me the confidence to do it. I don't get stage fright. Like, I feed off the crowd. But I get recording fright, I guess is what you could call it. Like, if I don't have eyes on me, like, and I'm just in a room with headphones on, and I can hear myself talking, hear my actual voice and how it sounds, I get freaked out. So I was like, holy shit, like, what do I do? So it took me a while to find my voice in the studio. So I really held us up on this a long time.
there is something about, you know, having the studio that just, I don't know, sometimes it can also like suck all the energy out of a good song, right?
Yeah.
And it's, so how did you end up overcoming that, or did you just continue to just say like fuck it, or what?
You know, we had so many days where like I'm in school, I work, you know, I've got, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, I help take care of my grandmother, like I've got a lot of things going on, but Saturdays are kind of my free day. So Chris and I would be like, all right, Saturday, 10 o'clock, we're gonna get started. We go through this like whole ritual. I'd drink, you know, stuff for my throat, you know, drink that throat coat tea and do vocal exercises to warm up. And I'd get in there and I'd be like, I mean, I couldn't get a peep out hardly. This went on quite a few times. And then it was like trying to be like, okay, we'll try to do it real quick, like in an evening, see if we can get one done. You know, I think I was just trying to go in there and wanting to knock it all out, which I don't know. But it wasn't until like one day when my girlfriend came over and like, I don't know, something about her being there just like calmed me down. And it was when I was able to get my first keeper.
An audience of one, right? So you might have had a little, I don't know. Just guessing on that.
Which is weird because I give a shit about what so few people think. She's probably the most in the world that I care what they think of me.
Right.
So like I'm doing like the hardest thing I can think of to do, you know, that thing I'm probably the most critical of. But I mean that just shows me the, you know, she's it for me. You
were playing against scratch tracks. The rhythm section came in later. No click track, anything like that.
No. There was a scratch guitar track. Then they recorded the rhythm, and then I came in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and then after I was all said and done, Chris disappeared for a while. Our last show we played before our release party was June 6th at the Rose Bowl, and then we didn't do anything till the release party. Chris like locked himself up and just, you know, worked. I think he about went mad because he didn't communicate with the outside world as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure he left the house to go get food and you know whatnot, but didn't hear much from him. And then it's just like every once in a while I'd get a text with like the new version of it and be like, what is going on here? Like when he was all done, you know, we figured out the logistics of who was going to mix it and who was going to master it, and went into the whole post-production.
Yeah. And what was the release date on that?
August 12th.
Kind of to cap this off, I just wanted to mention kind of what my favorite part of the album was. On TTT, I think there's this line of soaking up the ink all damn night. And I don't know what it is about that, and maybe in some ways I'm not sure I completely understand, but it gives me this great visceral feeling of like, what does that mean? And like, even from observing someone or being that person myself, it just struck me as I just love that line. That's all I'm saying. So
yeah, that was definitely a revision to that song, because originally when I was like 22 and wrote that song, it was borderline pornographic. Like it was a very, very dirty song. The guys were like, hey man, like not to be a prude or anything, but you think there's anything to, you know, innuendos and being a little more discreet about it? And I was just like, oh, well, whatever. But then like started rewriting and I was like, no, this is better. So, and I don't even remember what the original line was anymore, but we changed it to soaking up the ink all goddamn night. Really, it's kind of like as if you were talking about like drinking someone in. It reminds me of that. You know, it's like something you'd find in a trashy romance novel. You meet someone, you have a good time, and you just see them with, you're just soaking up the ink, their tattoos. It's like they no longer have clothes on, so that's all you see.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is my outfit.
That's interesting. So maybe this is just where my mind went, and when I was thinking about it, and it was one of my interpretations was thinking about tattoos in general, just maybe even from an observational viewpoint, but I was also just thinking about the idea of ink in general. You can't be close to ink without having it get its mark on you. And I thought, as you consume that ink, whatever that meant, I kind of kept it in more of a broader sense, but as you absorb it, it's like that ink gets all over you too. And so it's like, there's I get ink on my fingers from my pen, and it's just like, it doesn't go away for many days, and it just hangs off of you. Yeah. So I was just thinking, it's like, it's one of those things where you just can't get enough of it because you're soaking it up all damn night, but it'll stick with you for a very long time. I always love saying my interpretation probably of your words tells you more about me than it tells about you, which is, it's very, that's what I love about songwriting.
No, I'm into it. Well, see, that's the thing is I tell everybody is like, when I sing the words, I sing what they mean to me, but everything is open for interpretation. There's so much music I've listened to over the years, and I know what it means to me and makes me feel, the thoughts and images it provokes. I hate when someone's like, no, this means that. As so a matter of factly, I'm like, oh, thanks, dick. You just ruined that for me. I could think of 100 examples, but when that happens, I'm just like, you're an asshole. That's not cool. You just ruined that for me.
I love having what's great is multiple interpretations can coexist in my mind while listening to it. And it's just it's one of the things that's amazing about the human brain and music, and as an expression, is that overarching interpretation of the big picture.
That's the great thing about having your own interpretation, because it can literally, it can fit to you. I didn't become a punk rocker and start playing this type of music because, I wanted to find a little spot where I fit. I wanted something that I could have be all-encompassing as much or as little as I want. That's the great thing about it to me. Like I said before, even the name, it means whatever you want it to mean. I know what it meant to me, and I know what it means to me now, and, none of it's wrong.
Well, we'll have to save that for when I interview you about a favorite song that you've written. So what's your favorite part of the album?
It's one of those things where it's like, who's your favorite kid? You ask a parent that, and they're just like, well, I like, this and that. But I just, from the top, I just love how it kicks in. Like I said, it kicks you in the teeth. It's like, it lets you know, it's like, hey, we're here. Turn it up. Pay attention. I'm going to show you something. I think the transition of it's great. You talked about to the middle. There's a song where I actually, sing on. That's something I never thought I'd do. We joke around that's oh, that's the ballad. Right. If we were a 80s hair band, they released the banger and then they released the ballad. And then I don't know, Addict is pretty encompassing about, that just kind of speaks my story in a very small nutshell. Because it's this is what I do, this is how I do it some more. And then it's by the end of it, this realization that maybe this isn't the way, because it says, loses its luster when you stay in the game, can't stand to live a life that you don't want to claim.
I like that.
We're just getting off the ground. Plans are to do a lot of shows to beef up the support of this album. We want to start getting out some more, playing out of town, out of state, building it up to where we can kind of maybe go shop it around to get pressed by some record companies, distributors that that do this. You need to do all those things right now because no one's gonna, press 200 vinyls to sell if you aren't out there making connections with other bands. So like to try to hit out, Atlanta. Atlanta's like a big hub for all the stuff that I'm into right now. For a long while actually. And we're already starting to write new stuff.
Austin, thank you for coming all the way out here and telling me all about your album Losing the Luster and about Midnight Leg and your writing process. And it's just been a real pleasure just chatting about an album.
Thanks, Finn. Thank you for listening to Champagne is Also a Band podcast. This is Austin Parker from Midnight Leg reminding you can find Losing the Luster out on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple Music. Great music is out there. Go find it where you live.
That's a wrap.
Champagne is also a band.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
Studio South Peter on the inside.
It's like a 6-string blanket, just warms you up.